New York City boy, and he made good in Hollywood. Please welcome Reed Diamond.
Oh man, it's so awesome to be here. Thank you very, very much. I'm not gonna be able to live up to that, but it's
Oh,
gonna
please.
be downhill from here. But it's all good.
Hell no. You
Hell
know it, and I
no,
know it. I like that
dude.
old style. It looks like the one, that microphone thing that you got in front of you. It looks like the
Yeah.
thing from the Little Rascals when they were doing the International Silver String Submarine.
It's like, hello, my baby. Hello, my honey. Hello, my
Oh my God,
ragtime
Bishop and
gal.
Jake
Yeah,
Frog. That
exactly.
brings back memories, man.
This is actually. I think this is. I like this mic, but I don't know. I'm in my buddy's studio right now because I'm. This is my COVID bubble here in California. So he's
Oh
got.
wow.
He's got some nice sweet guitars in here, but yeah,
Oh
this is.
cool.
It sounds really good, and I
Oh yeah,
figured.
it's great sound, but I was just busting.
Yeah,
I'm a
you're busting my
Jersey boy. I
chops.
like to
I
bust
like it. Yeah,
balls.
yeah. I like my balls to be busted. I feel that's. I feel if it's not a little, if it's not a little crispy, if there's not a little tension, a little masculine energy, I'm not going to perform at my best. So yeah, feel free to take as many swipes as you want.
Yeah. I'll tell you what though, I've seen you in so many movies and TV, and I've always enjoyed your work. You're one of those quintessential guys that if they see you in the movie, then we know it's going to be good. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. This is going great. It's actually going much better than I thought. Now it's actually this is ascending into. Thank you very much. You're very
No,
kind. Yeah, man.
I call it like it is. I'm like I would be like my dad used to be. That never used to candy coat nothing. He used to tell you just like it is, and
Yeah.
I like it better that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, honesty. I prefer honesty. That's what I demand of most people that I love and have close and intimately in my life. I want them. I want the unvarnished truth. So God bless you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, no problem. So you're a New York City boy. I love that.
Yeah, and you're from Newark, which we're
Yeah,
just finding out now, which I love, man. Come
yeah.
on, we know.
I mean, Newark and Brooklyn. It's like two altered dimensions. It's the same thing with just different locations.
It's amazing, and I mean, we're obviously we graduated high school, which we just discovered in the exact same year. So we are probably the same age, unless one of us was advanced or got left behind. But I'm assuming we're the exact same age. So I mean, it was we lived in really magical times to be in the tri-state area, as it were. I mean, talking about music and talking about culture, and I feel so lucky that we lived, obviously because we love music, we lived in this transitional age between analog and digital. So we lived in this sort of analog world, and we lived in this unconnected, internet world. And then we got to benefit from technology when it first came in. And then now it's gone to a completely different place. And,
Yeah. I agree too. I mean, the 80s was so great. Music,
yeah, oh my
TV. I mean,
God. Yeah.
everything.
No.
I find so many people today still referencing it
Yeah.
and drawing from it. Like musically, I mean, MTV started it all. What a catalyst that
Yeah.
was for so much now. And you're right. And I never really thought about this, but we were on the cusp of the evolution of technology and digital stuff. And we were at the what do they call the infancy stage of it.
Yeah, we were at a real inflection point. I mean, growing up there, I mean, I still rode on subway. There were still subway trains running in Manhattan or New York City that were wicker from the 40s, right? They were the old with wooden poles, right?
Yes.
And right.
Oh my
And,
God.
and still, if you wanted to find out, I mean, in the late 70s, early 80s, if you still wanted to find out about a band, they either had to be local or someone had to tell you about them, or you had to read about them in a fanzine or a magazine. And it was a magical time. I mean, I think obviously we both love music. And one of the things that I love about that period that's gone now because of the internet, you can create something in your bedroom and you could be a sensation overnight. But in the old days, all these bands had to start in their area, and they may never have gotten out of their area, but they were famous then, So obviously in New York, I mean, when we were 10 and 11, you got CBGBs going hard, and I remember the first time I heard the Ramones, and I go, "What is this sweet, sweet music that is coming to me from this mysterious place downtown?" And or you think about if you grew up in Minnesota and Minneapolis and you're hearing the Replacements for the first time or Prince, and they're
Oh my God.
band,
Yeah.
right? And everyone had their local scenes. So that, unfortunately, that's that's something that we won't get to experience again, because you can be international in a second with one click on this little computer. You're worldwide. But people had to grow, and they had to play locally, and they had to build that local fan base, and then eventually they broke big and they got signed and they moved on. But it was a magical time musically, because all these little cultures formed. I mean, you're talking about even where we were. You're from Newark and I'm from Manhattan. They're still very different, right? There was a great gap. When you had to cross that bridge or cross that tunnel, there were whole different worlds going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is so cool. But yeah, it's fun to reminisce.
You know what I like, I find interesting about the bands I grew up with, even in the 70s, these people, these bands sold out arenas, and there was no internet back then.
Yeah.
The only way that you could have heard about them is if either you heard them on the radio or you read about them in Cream magazine.
Cream magazine. Cream magazine. No, dude, Cream magazine was the wallpaper of my room. So that's all I did. I'd cut out those pictures, and I luckily captured it on my little Kodak Instamatic. My whole wall was different pictures that I'd cut out from Cream magazine of all my favorite bands. And also, I mean, there's something so magical too about because we didn't have the internet. You had that, and we had LPs. We were just talking about vinyl. You had those LPs, and you were trying to glean some sort of secret information from the liner notes, right?
But you left everything to the imagination. You didn't have it all.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You listen to it, and and unless you, and it's so ironic now, because when we talk of to a lot of bands that performed back then,
right.
Remember how years ago a band used to have to sell records to tour?
Right. Of course.
Now you have to tour to sell records. Everything is flip-flopped.
It's funny. But I didn't think about records too. I mean, if you came over to my house and you had a record, we'd sit down and we'd listen to it. And we wouldn't talk. We'd put that sucker on and we would play it from start to finish in your room or in the living room or wherever we were, wherever our record player was. And it was sacred, and you would listen to it and evaluate it. And I've had to like rediscipline myself now with the new technology to listen to albums again and listen to them in order, because it's so, I mean, it's hard to imagine, because you've shown me your vinyl collection. And when we were kids, you really had to think, how am I going to spend my $5.99? What album am I going to buy? And you didn't know unless you went to one of those places. Maybe I didn't go, where you could have listened to it beforehand. So you're going, I think I like this band. I know I like one song. I'm going to take a chance on the album. And then you would usually find those deeper cuts that you liked, or you didn't. Maybe it wasn't a band that you liked. But now with this sucker, you can go click click click. I mean, I've got every, which is a miracle too. Don't get me wrong. You have access to every album and every song that's ever existed. But I've had to sort of re-discipline myself to listen to albums from start to finish as a piece, as a whole.
The technology is great, Reed, but it still was fun listening to the vinyl itself. You know what I'm saying? I think it takes a lot away. It takes a lot away from the experience in itself. Even though the vinyl was that crackling sound, but that was the beauty of it. You know what I'm saying? And if you look at it, you see it in a lot of stores. I won't buy the reissue stuff. I want original stuff. But they're reissuing vinyl. But what are they playing it on?
Well, it's funny because it's interesting because I still have all of my vinyl, and I still keep my turntable. But I mean, people are listening to it, but you're listening to it through Bluetooth speakers. So if you have a turntable that goes into Bluetooth, it's digitized to get to that speaker.
Oh wow, okay, right? I didn't even realize that.
I mean, I'm still the biggest regret I have in my life is that I sold all of my old stereo speakers that I had. The wooden clad ones that we all had.
Oh boy, yeah.
And because the assumption was, we all assumed that things were going to get better. The technology was going to get. This was an antique, and it's an apocryphal teaching moment where you go, okay, no, get it. Some technology you got to hold on to, and you don't get rid of, because it doesn't get better. It gets different, but it doesn't necessarily get better. And so I went after, I guess, I remember like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I went and bought an old receiver, an old stereo receiver, and then I bought old speakers, and you have to have those RCA connections to still keep the whole signal chain analog. Right. And I mean, sure, there's great digital stuff and we're not necessarily Luddites or old fogies who, there's great stuff came out on CD,
Hey,
but
we're wise in our years. I don't care. You can call me old. I think listen, everybody can make a case for their decade, but I think the
right,
80s was pivotal. And, speaking of like the stereo systems, I remember
right,
going to Crazy Eddie and buying my system and
sure,
for my
yeah,
car. I used to I
yeah,
got I, I kept going with the times. I had a Cadillac with the Volgrams because I lived in, it was like a
right,
prerequisite for the neighborhood. If you don't, they threw you out of the neighborhood.
of
But
course,
I started out with a Nakamichi, then I had an Alpine, then I had a
right,
Blaupunk radio for the
nice,
car. But I remember going to
yeah,
Crazy Eddie and buying this big, huge system piece by piece. And and it's so crazy now because you look at it and the experience of just having all that. And then we ushered in CDs, and then
right,
DV, you had VHS, and then before even DVDs, you had these laser discs, which didn't last long.
sure,
But I'm saying
yeah,
we saw a lot of evolution in our
yeah.
decade.
Well, we had cassettes too. You were listening to so much music on cassette tape too.
Oh my God, yeah,
But I mean, you talk about your car stereo, and I mean, now you got plugins so you can listen to what your music would sound like in a car. But I remember hearing the Cars, literally the band, the Cars, Rico Kasich and all those guys talking about how you would make your mix in the studio, and then you would go into your car and listen to it because you wanted to know how it was going to sound on a car stereo, because that's how so many people were listening to their tunes.
yeah,
Yeah,
wow,
I know. But we also got that. We were very lucky because we grew up, you and I were born obviously around late 60s, and then we had the 70s. And the 70s, I think, was such a magical time musically because every genre was just bumping. Or you had it was just when they do those silly things where they go, what are the best 100 songs of the decade? You go, how could I pick 100 songs from the
yeah,
1970s?
it's very hard.
Because you're going, what genre are we going to do it in? Are we going to do it in pop because there was amazing pop? Are we going to do it in rock? Because I mean, rock was at its heyday. Are we going to do it in disco? There was great disco. There was great soul, and then punk came along. And then right at the end, because there was this magical time. Because I was very into hard rock, but I was really into punk when it first came out in the New York scene and the British scene. But then there was this great moment where these punk guys around 78, 79 got good. Right? They because everyone started, you just needed 3 chords and a song.
Sex Pistols, right?
Exactly. You start a band, right? Sex Pistols, or, the Ramones, right? And you've got that, it's 3 chords. It's brilliant. But then they all got a little better and they got really good. And suddenly, and then this technology of synthesizers came in. And so you had this sort of post-punk moment, which was magical, where they've got a little technology, and then new wave came out of that. And new wave was really great because, talking about where we grew up, you can really romanticize those days, but they were bleak. The late 70s were really bleak in New York and Newark and where we lived. It was a dangerous time. People weren't doing well. It was a very gray and brown period. So when this sort of this music and the colors and the fashion that came with punk and then new wave and disco, obviously, is the same thing.
The disco was big in Newark, when you wear the platform shoes.
And it's funny, because you could take a stand at the time, especially if you're, when you're listening to Black Sabbath and you're like, I don't like disco, but you kind of did, because there was something beautiful about it. And also what I love about disco, and I listen to disco now unrepentantly. I listen to all this music because what's so great about disco was they were all playing their own instruments, right? It was all live. Everyone was recording.
Yeah.
There was no technology. So you've got you've got Nile Rodgers in there. You got Chic. I mean, those guys, those are just fine, funky licks, and they're playing, and everyone's playing live, and those bass lines.
And it wasn't a 3-minute song. These were like 10 minutes, 12-minute cuts, and that you know.
Because if you've got enough cocaine in you, you can dance for a long time, and it was
54 with the spoon.
Oh my God, yeah, just keep it on a little chain around your neck. Because we didn't listen to disco in my house, but because I grew up in an apartment building, my bedroom window was on a courtyard, and the people right across the courtyard from me were these young hip couple, and all they would do from 77 to 79 was have disco parties every weekend. So I heard all the music. So everyone's in there doing tons of blow probably, and they're just jamming out to all these songs. So I knew them all. It wasn't on my radio per se, because I've gone from the Beatles probably to the Stones, and I'm listening now to Zeppelin or whatever I'm listening to at that point, 77, 78. But all this disco is just coming through my window every night until 3 a.m. And and that's a cool thing about growing up in a city too, is you get all those musical influences. I have a real affinity for salsa, and because of all of the Puerto Rican and Dominican population in the neighborhood that I lived in, so I'm listening to so much of that music, and then my dad's listening to Broadway musicals, and my mom's listening to standards. So I mean, music's magical, and that's one thing I've tried to pass on to my kid, my wife, and I. We're playing, my wife loved, well, you don't know, but my wife loved disco and she loved funk and soul, and she's got all that. And then I've got all my, I'm listening to Echo and the Bunnymen and New Order and Joy Division and then we're playing standards and all that stuff. And all that stuff's going into my daughter's brain. So she'd sing every lyric of a New Order song or every lyric of a Sly and the Family Stone song. And then also she's showing me what she's listening to now, which is cool. And because I'm not against new stuff. There's great bands that I'm listening to all the time, and I'm always trying to find new music. And but also
I'm on the fence about it. I'll tell you why. Because and listen, there's so many talented people out there, especially in the pop thing. But I grew up in hard rock, heavy metal. I used to listen to disco. I was listening to disco up until Highway to Hell came out, the album, and then I never went back. And I think you're right what you said about living in there you go. And living in the big city, you have an advantage because you get everything because you're in a major market. So you get to experience everything, which is great. And what you said about my son is 9 years old and he's once he's playing Queen on drums and stuff, he wants to be a drummer. And it's cool because what I've noticed, Reed, I've been going to a lot of concerts, before all this nonsense with the COVID, but I go to see bands like Def Leppard. I've had Joe Elliott on the show. Judas Priest, Rob Halford's a good friend of ours.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, wow.
And when I go to those concerts, Reed, when they go to the PNC over here, and it used to be the Garden State Arts Center. But you go there, and even with a Kiss concert, there's 12-year-olds in the audience. Yeah. How do they even know that? That's now you're talking 5 and 6 generations.
Parents, yeah. That's so cool.
I think that's amazing. I think that's a testament to the band too, because you could, this not even your it's your great grandparents at this point.
But Kiss was my first concert. Kiss at the Garden was my first concert.
Oh, that's a nice kickoff. Yeah.
Oh, it was the best. And, and I was very lucky to grow up in Manhattan. I saw all my first shows at the Garden. Yeah. All those bands, AC/DC and Rush and so many great bands there. But yes, it was a different time. But also, what we were very fortunate in just in the time, you can't pick the time you live in, but we were very fortunate when you and I were born, the seminal rock bands were still together. The Beatles were still together when we were born in '67. The Stones, obviously, with the original lineup, and then with Mick Taylor on guitar, and the Who and the Kinks, and all these people who took American blues and put it through this food processor that I love and created this incredible music, right? And then we had the next wave of bands, of all the hard rock bands, like Led Zeppelin took it to another level, and then you've got Sabbath and all these. It was just this amazing music, but it hadn't existed. I think this is what we're so fortunate about. And I think what's difficult for bands now, because it went from blues and then it got translated into rock and roll in the 50s. And then we had the British invasion and that became something else. And then it went into all these different pathways. And Motown and all Motown, oh my gosh. And then we're hearing music that had never been heard. You're hearing sonic landscapes that had never existed. And it just kept going out and out and out. And then, the 80s with the introduction of electronic music and synthesizers and they were analog synthesizers too, which is very interesting, right? They had to play them, they had to program them. And then by the end of the 80s, somewhere in the middle of the 90s, we kind of run out of ideas. And now we were figuring out things to do. So there's all these cool bands because now we're in our 50s, right? And I'm meeting people who are in their 20s who are making music, and they love the music that we loved, but those paths have been trod before, right? And now the only difference is you can do it in your bedroom and you've got a drum machine on it, but I don't know what's next, because in some ways it feels as if all of the the parameters, all the barriers of rock music and all of its iterations have sort of been explored. But we were very lucky to be there when those sounds were new, where you never heard this sound. I mean, you think about the Edge and U2. I remember that first album, Boy, and you're hearing Electrico, and I'm hearing that delay come back at me and you're going, what the hell is this? I've never heard this sound before, because it hadn't existed before. Or you're just hearing Joy Division, and you're hearing Ian Curtis sing, and you're hearing these very simple guitar lines and the bass playing a lead really high up, and you're going, what is this? I've never heard this. It's magic. But now those paths have been crossed. I mean, these people they went to places, when Chic is making, when you're hearing Freak Out, that didn't exist before that. And now things seem derivative of that, but they kind of have to be. I mean, if you look at the long history of music, there's obviously ups and downs. There's periods. There's Vivaldi came along, and Vivaldi created a music that never existed, and then it stopped, and then Beethoven and Mozart come, and then you have all of these different periods. And so we're obviously, hip hop and rap have really, but now they're becoming pastiche. I mean, the first time we heard rap, that was so magical too. That's the late 70s. And
that exploded in the 80s, and Run DMC with breakdancing and stuff like that.
It was amazing. And you never heard these sounds. And they've got this technology which is very rudimentary, where they're sampling, and it's so magical. And now it's perfunctory. So now everyone's sampling and rapping. So
I just think it's overproduced now. I think that it's like, I don't think, I can't speak to all these artists. There's some really talented people, but I think they're just putting stuff out to put out. It reminds me of a Domino's pizza. It's like 30 minutes or less. It doesn't, it feels like it was rushed. And like I said, I'm not big on like these pop things. Some people with like really great voices, but I go, and I think that, like, growing up in the 80s, they had the technology we got introduced to, like MIDI. Was like on Star Trek when they invented the warp drive. That was like the big invention. So, and I see, like, like I said, when I see all the band, like going to see Foreigner in concert, even today, it's like a whole visual experience. It's not just this, like, I'll give you an example. That what's his name? The Robin Thicke, Blurred Lines. It's all right. I mean, you're sampling Marvin Gaye in the background.
Sure.
It's just doesn't do anything for me. I just feel like you're trying to trade off of something that, you're trying to use Marvin Gaye to hook in the song. I'd rather hear like Rob Halford singing Hellbent for Leather. But that's me, Reed,
Well, no, I think what you're saying, but I think what's interesting, we talk about Rob Halford, and I love Priest, and you're thinking about that didn't exist. And they created this sort of genre, and they're doing this, the incredible days of British metal of the late 70s. And are they punk? Are they metal? And they were a little more metal, but they're creating these sounds that hadn't existed before. I think what's difficult, because there are a lot of cool artists out there now, not necessarily mainstream artists per se, that are because as we said earlier, you couldn't pick the 100 best songs of the 80s, you couldn't pick the 100 best songs of the 70s, but the 100 best songs of the 10s of the last 10 years, like, what are they? They're not. They wouldn't even be in the mix of the 70s or the 80s. They wouldn't be in the top 1,000. Right. I think this is just my opinion, and please.
No, I agree. I know what you're saying. I agree too, because they're all basically sound the same.
But there's
no uniqueness.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for in music. So I think there are very unique artists out there, and they are out there, and have something very personal to say, and they have a relationship with whatever their instrument is that is very evocative and very personal. They're out there. I mean, I hear them every once in a while. I'll just do deep dives, and I'll listen to bands from Australia or somewhere and I'm hearing great music out there. But I think there's something that's going to come next, because we're still within the confines of the parameters of what rock music is, or alternative music is, or independent music. There's just certain tropes that you can't avoid. If you've got 4 instruments or 5 instruments, they're going to sound in a certain way. And something new is going to come. I mean, obviously, because you had the harpsichord, and then someone was going, well, I've got I've
Yeah.
invented, I've invented
Right.
the pipe organ, the pipe
Right.
organ. Then,
Right.
Bach is like, well, I'm going to go crazy on the pipe organ. So, I mean, obviously we got the benefit of the electric guitar. When the electric guitar came in, that changed music, right? But then the first guys were playing electric guitar. And then somebody goes, well, hey, I've got this, I can put this pedal in front of this guitar, this amp and this guitar, and it's going to make a little more sustain. It's going to be fuzzier. And then you've got freaking Jimi Hendrix who's taking this thing and he's changing it. So then music changes. And then somebody's got, well, I got this oscilloscope and I can turn the synthesizer and I've got this thing where we can make many sounds and it changes music. But now, right now, we're I mean, it's interesting. There's so many great things about music right now that I wish I'd had when I was a kid. I mean, if I'd had GarageBand when I was
Oh yeah, right.
when I was 12, right? When I'm first playing rock and roll with my first 8th grade band, and the tabs didn't even exist. I have to learn how to read music, right? Or learn how to learn it from the record, as people did. But if I'd had some genius tutoring me on YouTube, and then I had the system where I could actually record it, I think that's a wonderful tool, because there is great art out there. I mean, it's the same thing with my business now that I'm in with acting. I mean, if you wanted to make your own movie 20 years ago, you needed money to buy a camera, you needed equipment, and now
They're doing it with the GoPros.
Yeah, you could do it with your phone, which is great, because I do think you'll never be able to deny creativity and the people who are truly creative. But to go to how we started, we did live in the halcyon days. We did live in great days for the kind of music that you and I love, for rock and roll, for independent, for hard rock, for alternative. We lived in really, really magical times. And we were just very fortunate. And had we lived in the 1890s and all we had was John Philip Sousa doing marching band stuff, we'd be really bummed out.
Yeah,
So
I would have impaled myself.
But it's amazing because, I mean, you think about, you had Rudy Valley, right, singing in the 30s, and then Frank Sinatra came along, and people were like, what the hell is this? And they went bananas because suddenly Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra benefited. We talked about, I said about the electric guitar, those guys. Rudy Valley had to sing into a megaphone, right? And then suddenly this microphone thing came along, and they go, hey, we don't have to sing loudly. We can really work the song. And so then Bing Crosby and Dean Martin and Ella Fitzgerald and all of the greats, Louis Armstrong, they were able to use this instrument of the microphone and create a whole genre of music that didn't exist. You couldn't have that kind of music if you didn't have a microphone.
Well, the evolution of music is amazing.
It's amazing.
The transformation. Yeah. And the best part about it for me is my girl, she's 43. She's a little younger than me. She was born in the 70s, but and she makes fun of me being from the 80s, lovingly, but not mean-spirited. But we're listening to this. It's so funny. Because we're, with the radio show and the network, we get submissions all day long from great bands. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we get a lot of tickets because we do a lot of stuff with American Forces Network. So we bring a lot of veterans out to shows. So we get a lot of tickets. So I'm like, all right, we're going to see Joan Jett in Boston. Now, me and you would be salivating if we had tickets for that. So we get backstage passes. So we're driving to the show. It was down in Camden, and my girl's like, who are we going to see? Joan Jett and Boston. She actually had a YouTube Boston to see what they. She probably heard the song, but just didn't realize. And here's another funny story. We're watching Bohemian Rhapsody in the theater. Right. Now she knows of Queen, but and during the movie when they played Crazy Little Thing Called Love, she's like, "Oh my God, that's Queen!" Like she's so oblivious, but in such a cute way. Another thing that pissed me off, though, I didn't like. I seen it. I talked to Joe Elliott about 2 years ago, and I had to ask him this. I see a lot of people on Facebook, and I don't pay no credit. They're telling me rock is dead. It's far from dead, but I will say this, and Joe Elliott, I think, said it best. He said, "Is it the in-your-face style of the '70s and the '80s like it was? No, but it's certainly not dead.
It's not dead. It's not dead, but it's interesting because it's not when in the '70s and the '80s." Rock was at the forefront. You'd have those bands in the top 20, and that was the music that everyone was. And also, I mean, you think about the '70s. I mean, you think about. You couldn't even say rock. You had so many genres of rock. You
Right.
had soft rock, and you had southern rock, and you had hard rock, and you had metal, and everything was able to rise to the top. It's interesting. Did you see the Foo Fighters the other week on Saturday Night Live?
No, no.
And it was really you would have loved it because they did a stripped down version. It was, I guess, it was the night that Biden accepted the nomination, and they really slowed down one of those songs. You saw they're great artists, right? They're
Oh, yeah.
really,
I
and
love
they
them.
and
Yeah.
because also I think the other thing which has changed so much as things have become commodified is when I go to a show, if I go to a live show. And obviously, you and I went to shows before. That's how bands made their money. So instead of paying $400 or $500 for a ticket, I go see Van Halen.
For
The women
$12 and get
for,
like
for
sixth row.
$12. Exactly it. I would stand online, and that's exactly what I was going to say.
And you'd have like the front rows. Like
Yes,
nowadays, it's
right.
$1,000 for a meet and greet, $800 for a ticket. Get it.
Right,
You know,
but
I love them,
I get
but
it because they're not selling albums, right? So I totally get it. Like the economy, the economics of that system has changed. But also, what I always go to a live show for, the whole point for me of a live show is I don't go to a live show to hear the album. I go to a live show to have a unique, one of a kind experience, and that's what so you'd see bands, and the solo was never the same. They're improvising, they're doing the solo, and the patter is when they're talking to you, they're talking to you tonight. It's happening. I mean, I think that's what made U2 so exciting in the beginning, is because the band didn't even know what the freak Bono was going to do. Is he going to climb the sound tower? What's he going to do? We don't know. We're just going to keep playing till he comes back. But what's happened now, because things have gotten slicker, it's been tough because I've gone to a lot of shows with bands that I liked, and then it's like it's a pastiche. It's a Vegas show, right? It's you can even feel that the talk in between the songs, it's probably was the same thing 2 nights ago in Anaheim, right? It's the same conversation. But what I'm going is for that danger, because that's what was so exciting about rock, and still is, and there's still great bands out there. What's exciting about it is it's dangerous, and you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, that's what I look for in art anyway. That's what I look for in acting. That's what I look for.
Oh, absolutely.
I want spontaneity. I want to be surprised. Excuse me. But there's still, it's interesting. I'm listening to some alternative bands now that I like. I mean, they're saying something, but I also think we may be, as we were just talking about earlier, I think we may be on the precipice that there's going to be something new. There's going to be something different, a different way we listen to music. I don't know.
I think you're right, because I get, like
Yeah.
I said, I get submissions all day long for a lot of bands, and
Yeah.
the internet station that I own
Yeah.
is basically hard rock, heavy metal. But if it's a good alternative rock song, or as the only thing I won't do is like that death metal. I can't.
It's too much.
It's too much. It's not even. I don't. Like I said, not to knock them, but I don't need you screaming. If you have decent lyrics, if there's nice arrangement, whatever, the melody, the lyrics, I'll listen to it. But it's some of it's unlistenable. But I do think I think you're absolutely right. We are on the cusp of something going to happen, like a different genre or something coming out.
But it's funny, I mean, even the hard rock that we listen to, I've been, because now we have the luxury, I go back and I'll revisit bands that I loved, and I'll really do a deep dive. And I've done a deep dive back into Sabbath and to Ozzy. Now, Ozzy was this ear will never recover, because I sat on the side of the stage in Winnipeg, Canada, and watched him play in 2002, and he changed my life. But I was a huge Sabbath fan. But I've gone back into those albums, and there's so much variety. There's so much nuance in them. I mean, I'm trying to think of a frontman I've seen. I mean, I remember when I saw him in 2002, and when he's Zakk Wylde's playing guitar, and Trujillo, who's now Metallica, is playing bass, and his voice is pristine, and he's got such a strange persona on stage, right? He doesn't really move. He has that addled thing, but the voice out of him is just gorgeous.
He wasn't animated, but he had,
No, but he's funny and he's smart, but he's got a gorgeous voice. And I'm hearing him now. I just heard the last album, and he sounds amazing. But you go back to that Sabbath stuff, and it sounded, because that's always a thing too, because we were very fortunate to hear things before they existed. Because I remember the first time I heard that first Sabbath album, down, down, down. You know, the tritone that they play on that on Sabbath on Black Sabbath on the first album with that scary cover. And I remember being 9 or 10, and I couldn't go to sleep that night. I was so terrified by just the sounds they created because I'd never heard those sounds before. But I remember the first time I heard the Pistols, Sex Pistols. You're going, this is crazy. This is the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's too much. And then now it just sounds like rock and roll, right? And now Sabbath, now Sabbath, you hear all the blues in there and all the subtlety and all this, but it hadn't existed before. So it's interesting how revolutionary a sound can be the first time you hear it, and then it becomes common, and then people sort of vent off that and create their own music that's sort of derivative of that. I mean, obviously the world changed the first time people heard the Beatles. They'd never heard the Beatles. And I remember the first time I heard the Stones, and I go, what is this magical music, or the Kinks? And then, but even the first time you hear U2 and you're going, what is this? The sound hadn't existed. Or Bowie. Oh my gosh. I mean, Bowie. So many great people. But hard rock, it's so funny because it seems so hard and it seems so scary when we listen to some of it. And now it's so musical when you listen to it.
Yeah,
but it was
just
radical.
Music to you now. But back then it was like this surreal experience and you know what? Even better than the music, the whole package, even the album artwork blew you away. It was like the shock value. Like, look here, I'll show you. Look.
Oh, well, yes. Oh my God. Okay. Of course. Yes. So we're talking about all the, yeah, of course. but that was the way. I love you. I love you. I'm quite right in there. I love that's the way that you were able to communicate to your audience who you were, and seeing Ozzy like that. And because you and I would sit and we'd listen to the song and we'd just stare at the cover of that album. And maybe look at the back of it, but there wasn't much to be revealed. And then if it was a double, or maybe that you could open it up and maybe there'd be some sort of weird, mysterious liner notes that didn't make
or play
sense.
It backwards.
Oh yeah, you were trying to glean all of that. But let me ask you, because I mean, obviously you're an amazing music fan. Who's your favorite? Who are your favorite bands?
You know what?
I know it's a shitty question.
I mean,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Def Leppard. Yes. I'll tell you what, the biggest, and I'm guilty. I got to ask you right after. Best concert I've ever seen. Kiss, I love Kiss for years. I would have to say they're up there. But the greatest concert I've ever seen in my life, 1982 at the Brendan Byrne Arena, the Meadowlands.
Of course,
Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, when they had that. Rob came out on the motorcycle, and Eddie Iron Maiden came out with the big statue.
Of course.
And the whole thing, it was like, it wasn't just coming out. The whole package, it drew you in. And you know what I love the best about this whole thing, Reed? When people hear that music,
right?
It's almost like people that grew up watching when the Honeymooners were filmed. I saw it first run, so I'm like, ha, I heard it first.
That's it. That's the thing, and that's what we talked about at the beginning. It's like you were part of a scene and you heard it, and it didn't. You saw it before anyone saw it. No, I mean, I'm so into those bands right now. I've actually had a whole renaissance in the last 2 years I'm just listening to Priest and Maiden, and I've gotten much harder into Maiden because I was into Maiden before Dickinson got into Maiden, right? And early, like Murder in the Rue Morgue and all that kind of stuff. And now, but I'm really into Maiden, but I'm super into, Priest is killer. And I was really into Def Leppard. Right away from the first album, I was so into Def Leppard.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Rob's a good friend of mine, and this is going to be a good argument. I don't know if you've heard, have you heard Priest? It came out last year. It's called Firepower.
The new album,
Firepower. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you on WeTransfer.
I really want to hear it.
It is arguably their best album.
Yeah.
It's got a new twist to it, but there's that classic Priest signature in there. Yeah. But it's an amazing album. It's called Firepower. We just had Rob on the show. If you haven't done so, Reed, you got to read his book.
I will.
It's called Confess.
I love him, and I mean, there's no one like him, right? And the vocals and lyrics, and then that band. I mean, Maiden did the same thing where they're doing the dual leads and they're just playing together, and it just feels. I mean, I don't work out to anything but Maiden.
Priest. When I go to the gym, it's got to be heavy metal. Yeah.
And I throw in a little Rat. I start with a little Rat, then go in there, and then some Van Halen, of course, and even I'm throwing in some Kiss. Yeah.
Well, I always play one song when at every workout. I always start out with "Enter Sandman."
Nice. Yeah.
Nice. But
I
if you
start.
when you asked me before about the greatest front man, Ozzy
Right.
was great, but I got to give it to Freddie Mercury.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. No, no. I mean, Ozzy is an amazing frontman, especially because he's so not dynamic in the way he moves.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Freddie Mercury. No, 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 no kidding. I mean, yeah. I mean, Freddie's amazing, and that band was. Did you obviously saw them live?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because we had Frank Marino on of Mahogany Rush, and he toured with
Right.
Queen, and I've never met Freddie Mercury. He was somebody that I wished I could have just been
Sure.
experienced,
Yeah.
but I was like, so Frank, what was it like working, what was Freddie Mercury like? And I'm thinking he's going to give this. He goes, oh, he was a dick.
Is that what he said?
He said it right on our show. It was so funny.
That's
But
fantastic.
but
They obviously, yeah.
and he said, he goes, let me give you guys a little insight. Whenever you hear a band or an artist say, oh, it's not me, it's my manager, it's bullshit. It's them. They're the ones that make the decision. So I like that he was
Yeah.
you know,
Sure.
candid about all that. But
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it's just, and I, what, between watching movies and TV shows that you did and all
Right.
this music, that's the only thing that's getting me through this pandemic. Like
Sure.
everybody loves Raymond, listening to
Yeah.
Priest,
Yeah.
ZZ Top. I mean, come on.
No, it's great. And I mean, music, there's nothing more important to my soul than music. I need it. And I'm constantly, still just the other night, I'm just creating playlists and putting things together and revisiting music that I loved and I hadn't listened to in a while. And I'm staying with a musician. And so we're talking about what we like, and he's pulling out his vinyl. There's nothing that's more inspiring. In fact, every time I create a character, anytime I'm doing a character on a show, I create a playlist for that character. I create music. I don't create the music, but I create a playlist of music that gets me into the mood and the mindset of that character. There's nothing.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's nothing more.
Speaking of
Yeah,
acting, a lot
talk
of
to me.
people,
Yeah.
for those of us just joining us, we're speaking with phenomenal actor Reed Diamond. Reed, I know, when did you know you wanted to do this? When did it hit you, say, hey, because I know you went to Juilliard, which has got to
Yeah.
be cool. When did you, was it on your radar, or did something happen that, was just by chance, or?
Yeah, I was really I remember I did Oklahoma at PS 84 in 6th grade, and I played in Manhattan, and I played Will, the comic lead in that, and I loved it. And I remember the girls responded well to me, and all the adults were impressed, and I just had so much fun doing it. So I knew acting was a thing. And then when I went into junior high school, I was acting, but then I really got into music, and I was playing in bands, and I had a band in 8th grade, and we played the 8th grade dance, and
You played a Battle of the Bands?
well, this was a very important moment in my life. So our band, I played with my buddy Ian Levy. Ian Levy was a great guitar player. I was a guitar player, and he was really into the blues, and I was really into rock and hard rock. So we called our band Black and Blue.
Wow.
Black and Blue, that was our band, and we had groupies in 8th grade. We had girls from the local Catholic school who would come over and hang out at our rehearsals, and I take them all out to lunch because my dad was the director for the Joe Franklin Show. Do you remember the Joe Franklin Show?
Oh yeah,
Channel
okay.
9. Yeah, so my
Cool.
dad directed that show. So Joe had these vouchers for Bagel Nosh. Do you remember Bagel Nosh? It was like Bagel Nosh was this little, right. It was a place where you get bagel sandwiches in New York City. So I'd be like, hey guys, let me take you all out for lunch. I take all the girls and the band out to Bagel Nosh because we rehearsed every Saturday. So usually the dances at my school were someone would DJ them. In fact, I used to bring my records to there, and I still have the stamps because you'd have to stamp them. I'd stamp them with my name and my address.
With
So I
the
got my
milk
albums
crate?
back. Yeah, exactly. So I got them back at the end of the night. And so we auditioned to play the 8th grade dance. And I remember we auditioned for my history teacher and we auditioned for the principal. And our signature song at the time was Brown Sugar. We were really good at Brown Sugar. And we just kick in and we killed Brown Sugar, like do, 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 do. And so the principal and Ms. Griffin, the history teacher, they were very impressed. Like, yes, you can play the dance. And so I think we had probably 3 songs that we were really good at, but we ended up coming up with maybe like 30 song set. And some of those songs we'd rehearsed once or twice. So this was a very important learning moment. So I don't know if you've ever played in a band, but like the first time you play, when you're playing live, it's a whole different vibe than playing in your bedroom, because suddenly your hands are sweaty, your hand doesn't move down the neck of the guitar so well. And I had this shitty guitar that I'd bought over on 48th Street for $100 that every time I hit a bar chord, it would just immediately go out of tune. And I remember I'm out of tune on the first chord of Brown Sugar. And at a certain point, I think it was such a horrific car crash. I think the bass player was actually never plugged in, because he hadn't learned any of his parts, so he didn't plug himself in. But we played. The best song of the night was we did Ramones, I Just Want to Have Something to Do, which is the first song that I ever learned off an album. But then I got into another band in 9th grade, but I really got into theater in 9th grade as well. And I had this moment where I go, I guess I have to choose, because these are both careers or artistic paths that require all of you. So I need to decide, am I going to be a guitar player or am I going to be an actor? And in 9th grade, I pretty much decided I was going to be an actor. And
oh, wow.
It turned out that because when I went into 9th grade, when I went to freshman in high school, there was a new head of the theater program, this guy, Michael Gilbert, who was amazing. And we were doing amazing musicals and amazing plays. And girls from all over Manhattan and Brooklyn were coming to see the plays, which was really great. So there was no point in being in sports, because no one was coming to see the sports teams, but girls from all over town were coming to see the plays. And the musicals. So it was great. So it was socially very beneficial. And I had a real talent. I had a talent for acting and I had a passion for it. So I made that decision. But in my late 30s, I started a band again with one of my best buddies, and because I love music, and I wish. It's interesting because acting's my job. So when something becomes your gig, it can be quite creatively rewarding at times, but also times it's your job and you just have to get up and do it. And music's always been my passion. I love music. So it was great to have a band, and we started recording. We wrote our own songs, and then my wife ended up becoming the lead singer of the band, and that was a really fun time.
Oh, wow.
And I still love playing music. And it's funny because I'm saying with my buddy Andy, he's got some gorgeous guitars here, but the only problem is we have completely different tastes in music. So we have nothing to jam on. We don't have any parallel lines. But you asked how I got into acting. So I knew about ninth or 10th grade. That's what I was going to do with my life. So 14, 15. And then I was lucky enough to grow up in Manhattan. So my first manager just happened to come to one of my shows right at high school. And I started acting professionally when I was about 16, 17, and I've never had another job. I've earned a living as an actor since I was a teenager. And it's been, I couldn't have asked for a better a career or life path. But yes, there's part that I still fantasize about, if I'd practiced harder at guitar, could I have been a musician if I'd spent more time just alone in my room? Because I still record, I still write, I still play. I love playing out.
Well, if your acting skill is any indication, then you would have been a rock star. So that's a no-brainer.
You're so kind.
But your first movie was Memphis Belle, 1990, right? So you're 5 years out of high school. That's like a dream come true. That was It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was a big enough movie to say, hey. But that being said, that was your first movie. But when did you officially catch the bug when you become professional? When did you really know, oh my God? I mean, was it before that or was it?
Oh yeah, because I was already, so what ended up happening is I started in the theater and I started in New York and I was doing all the plays at school. And then I think when I was 17, so this manager saw me doing the Diary of Anne Frank at my high school, and I went to meet with them in the morning. They sent me out on my first commercial audition that afternoon, and I got it. I got the first audition I ever went out on for Panasonic Radio, and this, well, because you love music, this ad, it was let the music do the talking. So it was this ad where I played this really preppy guy who walks into a barbershop and everyone's listening to different Panasonic devices. So this is 84 and they're listening 84, 85, and they're listening their whatever Panasonic's version of the Walkman was, and they're all getting punk haircuts. And then I put this on and I get a punk haircut and I dance out. But that commercial premiered during Live Aid, which I watched as you probably did too, I watched every second of. So I got up early on that morning to watch every second of Live Aid. And then I'm sitting there with my girlfriend and my friends, and there's my commercial premiering on Live Aid. And that commercial, so about 16, 17, so I went to college. It's funny, your radio show is called Animal House Radio, right? So I was already earning a living. But I went to college because of the movie Animal House.
Oh, well, that was my favorite movie. Yeah.
Well, it must be, right? So that movie changed my life when I saw it. And I'd been this really, studious kid, and I was working and I was already earning a living. I spent all my summers in high school doing summer stock or doing something professional. I was always working as my career as acting, which was acting. And I really go, well, I want to have some fun. I want to have that Animal House experience. So I went to college for a year and a half, and I did it because I was already an actor. I knew that whatever grades I got in college wouldn't matter. I wasn't going to have a studious academic path. So I went there, joined a fraternity, partied my butt off. And
did you have the devil and the angel moment on your shoulder?
Many times. Many times.
Oh, yes.
Many times.
Well, wait, let me ask you a question. Was this around this time?
Yes.
Was that you?
That's exactly that's me. God, you're good. That is it. That's 1985. That's me in 1985. That jean jacket in college, the next year when I was in college, that was a pillow many a night. It kept me warm many a night. I partied hardy in that, because also the beauty of that jean jacket is I still have that jean jacket, by the way, but it had these interior pockets that would hold, you could put a tall boy Budweiser in each side of the pocket and sneak it into wherever you were going. So that's the magic of that jacket. But it was also, that's my first headshot. So yeah, so that's the beginning of my career, 1985.
I also had the denim jackets, but mine had, did you ever have the album artwork on the back of your jackets?
I didn't. I was from Manhattan.
Oh boy, I had Blizzard of Oz was my first one.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, of course you did. I was oh my God, I was just listening to Blizzard. I was just listening to Blizzard of Oz today. But yeah, so then I went to college for a little while to do my Animal House, which I'm ashamed to say, and hopefully my daughter's not listening to this because I don't recommend it. And then that's where I sort of had an epiphany one night with maybe the help of some substances, and I go, I need to get more serious. And I go, I'm going to go apply to Juilliard tomorrow, and I did. And I applied to Juilliard, and then I auditioned, and I got in. And so I did my classical training there. And then in the middle of my time at Juilliard is when I did Memphis Belle while I was still in school. While I was still at Juilliard, they let me take a few months off and go do the movie. And that movie was a life changer. I mean, so I've been doing commercials. So I paid for college. I paid for Juilliard with my commercial career. Because back in the day, those commercials would run forever. So that Panasonic commercial paid for maybe the first year of college. And then right before I started Juilliard, I did a Subaru commercial that ran for 2 years. And it paid for, because I had to pay for Juilliard. I paid for Juilliard. The first 2 years of Juilliard, I paid off of that a Subaru. The next 2 years, I paid off of Memphis Belle. And so the year before I did Memphis Belle, I did an after school special. Remember those?
Oh, I used to, yeah.
Oh yeah, I did an ABC after school special, which was very exciting. And it was really good. It was called Date Rape, which at the time was a novel concept that yes or no means no. And then Memphis Belle, but Memphis Belle was a life changer, right? To have that as your first movie. I went over to England for 4 months. I'm 21 years old. And they've got an apartment in London, and I'm working with all these actors who have you had DB Sweeney on your show?
Yes, I actually did. I had him.
I thought so, yeah.
When he was doing the two dumb mix.
Exactly. So DB, I flew over the first time I flew to England to do the movie. I flew over with him and Harry Connick Jr. We're in business class on British Airways or TWA, whatever it was back in the day. And I worked with all these amazing actors who I was a huge DB Sweeney fan. I was a huge Eric Stoltz fan. I was a huge Matthew Modine fan. And then I'm in a movie with them, and we go to boot camp, and we have rehearsal, and we're making this movie, which I feel really lucky. I was a huge. I was a World War II aficionado, and I was a big B-17 freak. And then to make this movie and have this experience too, which is interesting because per our conversation earlier about an analog world, this was a movie made pre-CGI. So we had to do, everything was real. So all of the air sequences, they brought planes. So I got to go up in a B-17 in the top turret, which is where my character habitated. And I fired blanks off as the Messerschmitts are flying in, as we're flying over the patchwork farmlands of England. And then so it was a really, really magical experience, and an amazing, probably a terrible first film, because it's hard to sort of repeat that experience where I made lifelong friends, and I had a creative experience and a human experience, and I had money in my pocket, and I was a young man on the loose in London. It was a magical time.
It's funny you mentioned Matthew Modine. I'm a huge Matthew. I can't get him on the show. He's got these publicists that are like, and that's what sucks about some of these publicists. Like they're young kids. They don't want to. Nobody wants to have a phone conversation. It's email me, and I get it. But I would love to have Matthew on just to talk about Vision Quest, talk about an 80s movie.
Sure, yeah, of course. He was amazing, Vision Quest and then oh God, Vision Quest. I know, right? Thinking about
because I was like him. I was very good in high school at wrestling, and I had this similar situation where I wanted to.
Did you climb the rope?
I was a heavyoweight, so I couldn't do any of that, but I did most of my stuff on the ground. But
what? So you wrestled heavyweight. So what was that weight back then in high school?
I think it was well, I think it was over 200. I'm not sure what it was. I know 185 was the next weight down.
Oh yeah. Because I wrestled 134. And
129 when I was in high school was like the toughest weight in the state.
Of course. Yeah, because those guys are strong and fast. They'll kick your ass.
But so now you did Homicide, Life on the Street.
Right.
You did,
one
of the things I liked that you did the best was 24. You were a son of a bitch in that series.
I was.
I mean, Kiefer Sutherland, I love him. He played that role to a T. It was such a dark role. But you had also William Devane. What was it like being with William Devane? Another guy that was like, did you ever get starstruck when you were on a set with somebody?
Oh, a million times. I mean, it's always interesting to see when you run into people who you're starstruck by, because, and I love that. I love that feeling. I love, especially even after 35 years in the business, is people who get you excited, people who give you little butterflies or a little nervous. But I've worked with a lot. I mean, I did a movie with Joanne Woodward in 1992, and she was just amazing, and I'm such a huge fan of her. But then I'm sitting down having a beer with her and Paul Newman, her husband, right? And you're going, and then Paul Newman's the menschiest of all mensches, right? And he's just the most self-deprecating, wonderful. And that's the thing. I've been really blessed because I've worked with a lot of big movie stars, and the big movie stars that I've worked with have all been just the menschiest of mensches. George Clooney and Brad Pitt, just guys who are just so wonderfully open and sweet and welcoming, and aware of who they are and how you might react to them. And those have been some of the highlights. I mean, I've worked with some real douchebags too, but who I won't mention. And some of them were people.
That's for another show.
Because they say, right, don't meet your heroes. And I've met a few of my heroes that have been disappointing. But for the most part, everyone I've met has been wonderful and great to work with. And I remember George did this crazy thing. George cast me. He directed me in this movie, Good Night and Good Luck. And so this is 16 years ago, 15 years ago. And I didn't meet him. I auditioned, and then he cast me. And I'm walking on the CBS Radford lot in Los Angeles, and he sees me across the lot. And he runs up to me and he grabs me in a big hug, and he's like, "Reed, I'm so glad you're doing this movie." Fucking George Clooney, right? And I go, "Oh, dude, whatever you want. If you want me to go die on that hill for you, I'll die on that hill for you." And that's that energy that he has. And when I worked with Brad Pitt and Moneyball, same thing. Just a great guys. So. But I get starstruck. I mean, I was so lucky. I did a show for 4 years with one of my all-time heroes, Malcolm McDowell. I did
Oh
Franklin and
wow.
Bash and Clockwork Orange and all those amazing movies. But yeah, I get starstruck. But now for me, it's probably more. It would, per this conversation that we've been having all day, it would be musicians more than actors who would freak me out, because
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's people that there was okay. I was a huge U2 fan forever and ever and ever. And I'm working out at the gym, and this is, God, it's got to be like, I'm saying maybe 2001. And I just seen U2 the night before at Staples Center, and I'm working out at the gym, and there's Larry Mullen Jr. stretching on the mat next to me. And I'm going, oh my God. And I almost burst into tears, right? It was like seeing John Lennon or George Harrison or something was immediate. I was like, oh my God, I can't talk to him. And, I was young. And now I've made a pact that if I ever see anyone who I'm a fan of or is a hero to me, just say hi. Just go up and tell them what they
Yeah, I do the same thing, Reed. I try to make it seem like, you're just another. My father was like that. They're just working people. But
they are, because if they're good people, and most people are, they get it. They get that you care and you've had an impact on their life. I mean, I want to tell certain people, you're the soundtrack of my life. You've meant something to me, and there's a way to say it. But I think the best of the best understand the impact they've had on you, and they appreciate it. And if you come up in a respectful way and in an authentic way, I think you get that back.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough that the show's been on for 4 years so far,
Right.
and we're getting hundreds of celebrities.
So
And
cool. Yeah.
the two that stand out to me the most was Ernest Borgnine, who's no longer with us. You're
Yes,
talking about an
Ernie. Yeah,
Oscar
of course.
winner,
Yeah. Love that
Marty,
guy. Yeah.
Airwolf,
Oh, yeah.
Escape from New York, the cab driver, the
Oh, yeah. Of
Poseidon Adventure. And
course.
then more recently, about a month ago, I had Lou Gossett Jr. The man is 87 years old, Reed, and he shows no signs of slowing down. It was
He's
like,
amazing.
my background is, I never, I'm not in a band, but I love music. But I did comedy since 1987, and then now I'm doing the radio.
Yeah.
I got to open for Don Rickles, and when I met him in the dressing room backstage, I actually knelt down and cried at his feet, because it was like he was an outlier. That's like you meeting Olivier.
Yeah. Or I mean, that's like, hey, dummy. There's nobody better than Rickles. I mean, come on. And he was amazing. I still go back and I watch him. I'll go down the deep
roasts.
dive of watching him, or just watching him on Carson.
Yeah, because you gotta watch the Dean Martin roasts. I YouTube them all the time, because
I watch them all the time. Those guys were amazing. My wife just sent me a YouTube of Dean Martin on Carson, totally lit. It's him and Bob Hope, and then Bob Hope was, because these guys were fast, they were funny, and it was a different. Talk about another time. There was an ease, and there was a tempo to those talk shows too, where those guys riff. They're loaded. But they were hilarious. I can't believe you got to meet Don Rickles. That's fantastic.
I actually, my girl was with me, and she's like, relax, but it's hard to explain it to somebody, and she was amazed to meet him. But you've done so many different roles, and I like all your stuff. Well, when somebody approaches you with a script, Reed, what does it need to have in there for you to be interested in? I know it's a lot of zeros at the end of the check is always good, but what attracts you to a role? It's got to have substance or some kind of meat to it, I would assume.
I remember a smarter actor than I said, it just needs to have something. You have to have something to do, something active to do. But I'm a big proponent of saying yes, because a lot of times you just have to throw your hat over the wall, or jump off the bridge and just go for it, because I've certainly had more great experiences from saying yes than from saying no.
Right.
So I've been very fortunate. Lots of great roles have come my way. I've had to fight for some, and then some have been offered to me. And but ideally, if I'm choosing, I'm looking for. Is there something for me to say? Is there something for me to do? Something active, I think, is a better word. Because if it's just me crying and confessing to a crime that's not necessarily going to be a ton of fun. But I think maybe even a better way to phrase it. What I do is I play a kid's game, right? It's pretend, right? That's all I'm doing. I'm playing a kid's game at an adult level. So there has to be some aspect of it that just gets me hot, that stimulates me, that invigorates my imagination. And that's it. Where if I go, I can have, and I'm going to say this word, I want to have fun with it, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be a fun role, but just something that gets me excited. Because I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, when people overcomplicate acting, obviously, what's complicated about acting is you're playing this children's game, but you're playing it at an adult level, and you have to do it under the worst possible circumstances, right? You have to do what separates a professional, because I think lots of people can act. I think lots of people are talented and lots of people are funny, but what makes you a professional as opposed to an amateur is that you have to do it under the worst possible circumstances, when everyone's going, we got 1 minute to do this, we're losing the light, people are being mean, whatever's going on. You're playing a scene in the desert and it's 20 below zero, right? It's all of those things. So that's what it's, but I think when you're a kid, if someone said you're going to play the King of England right now, you go, okay, I'm the King of England. That's exciting. But if someone's like, okay, you're going to play a sheep, like, I don't know if I want to play a sheep today. That's not as exciting. So it's just, that's the fun of it. If there's something where I go, I can sink my teeth into it. And I've been really lucky in this, because you go through iterations in your career, you go through different periods. So as soon as my hair got a little gray, I started playing more villains, and I love villains because they're fun. They're always the most fun part.
Yeah.
It's a terrible career choice because you're always going to die, but artistically, it's a ton of fun because it's you get to be also in a way that I don't get to be in my real life.
Are you afraid though to get stereotyped into that? Because that's what I noticed with a lot of actors. You see this, they're always the detective, they're always this, they're always the thug. I'll give you an example. And I'm late to the party on this. I only discovered this show because of the binge watching on COVID because we're locked down. But Chicago PD is a phenomenal show.
Yeah.
And the guy that Jason Begay, who plays the Hank Voight, I mean, great. I actually, they play the role so well that you actually think he's a cop, and he's not exactly the most above board. But it was just a very interesting role. Do you try not to portray the same character?
Yes, because here's what happens. You do get typecast. So in a career as an actor, what happens is, okay, so when I first started, I'm young, I'm playing boyfriends. So I'm doing a lot of kissy face. And I remember I go, well, I want to play a cop. And I remember having a manager at the time. She goes, no, you got a lot more kissy face to do before you get a gun. And I was like, well, screw you. I'm going to prove you wrong. So then I got homicide. So then I'm playing a cop, right? And so then after that, everyone's like, oh, he's a cop. And then you have to so if you talk about being offered things, when I'm offered things, they're only going to offer you something they've seen you do before. But so then you go through periods where you got to change it up. So every time I want to change it up, I go, no, this is really what I kind of want to do right now. I got to go fight for it. So every once in a while, you just got to get out there and you got to really just go, no, I think I have something to say about this guy, and you got to fight for it. And you change it. And so, I started in comedy. I started in improv. I was an improviser for years, but then my first few jobs were all drama. So then they go, well, you're the drama guy. And then you play a cop, and then you play lawyers. And I do go through a period of lawyers. And then I went through a period of FBI agents. And then I go through a period of villains. And now in the last 2 years, I have a new manager who I sought out, and I love her madly. And she's like, we're going to change this up. And we've changed it up. So now I'm playing I've played the most variety of characters probably in the last 2 years that I've played in a long time. But that's because she's going, no, let's do something different. Let's do something different. But which is exciting because I've benefited in that I've had a career as an actor. I've earned a living as an actor. I've never done anything else. I've been a working actor, but I still got to get out there and create it every day. I haven't.
Keyword working.
Working, yeah, which is really great, and I'm really blessed, right? But
Right.
I'm not a household name, and so I still have to get out there and wake up every day and go, okay, let's go, let's make this happen. And yes, things get offered to me, but also sometimes I got to go out there and really fight for it, which is good because it's a good muscle to have because
Right.
it keeps you young, it keeps you excited, and it keeps you true because
Keeps you hungry.
keeps you. And I'm hungry, and that's
Yeah.
I love it. I personally. Because I went through a period where I was doing a lot of stuff between you and me and everyone listening. I was doing a lot of stuff that was paying well, but wasn't really as creatively exciting.
Basically one-offs, right?
Well, one-offs, or I'm even doing series. I'm doing long-term characters on network stuff. I pretty much. It's not requiring very much of my soul or my talent.
Skill set, yeah.
My skill set, but and I realized about, I guess, exactly 3 years ago, I go, I got to change this up. And now for the last 3 years, I've been as excited about acting as I was when I was 14 and 16 and when I was first starting out. I love it. I mean, I love going to work every day. I don't mind fighting for stuff. I don't, because of the trap. The danger is you go, hey man, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've been on all these shows. Why do I have to? But why do I have to fight for this? And you have to.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, yeah.
Well, I mean, or fortunately, I think because it's definitely made me stronger as a person, better as a dad and a husband. And also I'm more excited about the work, and I've done exciting work. And I'm doing Bosch right now, which I love, and I'm playing an amazing
That's
character.
a great show.
I love it. I'm working with a bunch of homicide people that I knew from back in the day. And they just rebooted the show Leverage. And I just played the most amazing bad guy on that thing for a couple of episodes.
Really? Wow. I used to watch that. Yeah, with
really
Timothy
cool.
Hutton, right?
Exactly. And now he's not in it. Noah Wiley's doing, sort of replaced him in that, but all the rest of the cast is the same. And we just shot that in New Orleans. And it was magical. I was just so happy. And we're just getting excited to come to work each day. So I love it. I love it as much as I did when I was a teenager, and that's great, and it's exciting. And
well, that's great. Yeah, well, that's because you don't really. Well, yeah, sometimes you don't really hear that people still have that fire in their belly. Sometimes it fades away. But that being said, Reed, let me ask you. You said you've luckily said yes to things and as opposed to no. Was there a time that you turned something down that you said, oh my God, why did I do this, that you regretted, that it turned into this big movie that you were like, oh shit, what did I do?
Yes, I've said because after Homicide, I'm sure my ego was not my ego. I also hadn't gone to therapy yet. My ego was in a strange place. So I said no to a bunch of things that went on to be successful series that I could have done. But, and then I sort of took a hold of myself and cleared out some of the cobwebs and got rid of some of the old BS that was going on in my brain. And I got myself straight, I sort of straight myself, because you just need to have a little relationship with your ego. And I did that in the late 90s, early 2000s, and things really turned around. And after that, I really never said no to anything, because you never know. I mean, I can't tell you how many shows where they've asked me to come do an episode and then I stay there for 2 seasons, right?
That's a great testament to your talent. If you're only
I'm
there for
lucky.
one episode, hey, why don't you stick around? Yeah,
but that's what it is, and you don't know. And then they're like, "Oh, we like Reed, and Reed's brought something to it." So, I mean, when I did the first time I worked for Joss Whedon on Dollhouse, I was just supposed to do one scene in the pilot, and then just in that day, he goes, oh no, and he created the character for me, or Designated Survivor 24. I literally was coming for one episode, and then I end up staying. I become the big bad guy, or I stay for 2 seasons, and that's been the arc of my career. So, um, ego, obviously, in all things, you need to have confidence, but you can't have arrogance, right? And you have to
Mm.
really, no matter what you do, and you need to stay hungry, and you can't get complacent. And I've gone through periods of hunger and then complacency, and now I think I really learned, and certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, that no, never stay hungry. Stay hungry. It's
Stay
great.
grounded too. Don't you know?
And grounded wasn't as much of a problem, but hungry for the work. I mean, grounded, yeah,
Right.
you better stay grounded, because there's nothing more repulsive than someone who thinks that their stuff doesn't stink, or because it's
Right.
you have to
And they
keep
don't
proving.
realize that they could be replaced in a heartbeat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and there's so many talented people out there, and also, I mean, the business has changed in a lot of ways in my career in 30 years. I mean, there's a lot less room for a-holes, and I've been really lucky to work with so many great people, because that's what you want. You want it. It shouldn't be tough work, socially
Right.
on the set. You should really work with people who are inspiring you, and you're inspiring them, and it's a good give and take. I mean, I come from the theater. I'm all believe in improv comedy. I believe in ensemble. I believe in all of us. I rather pass you the ball and you score than I score. And as I always
Yeah.
say, I
The
taught improv.
chemistry. Yeah.
I taught improv for a few years at my daughter's school, and I said an assist is as good as a goal, because it really
Oh
is. Because
yeah.
if you set the
Yeah.
other guy up, the other person up, that's the gift. I mean, when I watch a soccer match, I'm always like, who's the guy who's putting it in front of the net for the guy to kick it in? That's the magic.
Well, it's
Um,
teamwork. It's like,
it's
and
teamwork.
that's the way
Yeah,
and I think
it should be.
Hollywood
Yeah,
has evolved in
yeah,
that sense. Um, Reed, let me ask you, this pandemic was terrible and for
yeah,
everybody, but
yeah.
as someone as busy as you, how did you handle it having all this downtime? I mean, have you done anything lately? I mean, are you working now
I've been
or
really lucky. I've been really lucky to. I started working the first week of August, and I haven't stopped. So
Oh, cool.
I'm working right now. It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. It's not interesting. It's just the truth of the matter is, I loved lockdown for a while. If I could have earned a living, because I love my family, I love my daughter, I love my wife. So being at
Right.
home, we live in Toronto right now, and it was a great time to and remember what's important. But obviously, it's interesting because I have a strong relationship with economic anxiety, because I'm a professional actor. So I have amazing years, and I have years where I go, I hope I can put it together. So I have a lot of empathy, and true empathy for what the impact of this is in people's lives. And I think yeah, I mean, obviously we've lost people, and that's scary. But I think, the true toll right now is on people's livelihoods and jobs that may never come back. And I think that's what's um,
Yeah. Yeah.
most terrifying. I mean, so for me personally, I have a real relationship of that. I mean, I have a child, and there's years where I'm on a series, and there's years where I'm hoping I get a series and I don't have one, and I'm hoping I can make car payments and house payments. So and that's which also keeps you grounded in a way. I live in the real world, so the pandemic has been. I mean,
It's a
I tend to
double-edged
be
sword, right?
yeah, and I mean, I tend to be a glass half full kind of guy. So I I think we're living in extraordinary times, right? And we haven't had to live in extraordinary times. I mean, right now I've been away from my family for 4 months. I've never been away from my
Oh,
family that
wow.
long, because I'm in my COVID bubble, and I'm here working, and I can't go home because I have to quarantine if I go home. And I keep thinking about how my grandfather went off. Both my grandfathers went off for the Second World War and didn't come back for a couple of years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had kids and wives, and and so we're in an extraordinary time. So my family understands that I have to go where the work is, and it stinks. And luckily we have this magical device that I can look at
Yeah.
them and they can look at me, but otherwise I'd be writing them letters. So I think we will come out stronger from this, but that doesn't mean to diminish the suffering that people are going through. But I mean,
Oh, yeah.
and people are really, these are hard times, and I hope with the next administration and stuff that we really remember to take care of the people who are struggling, but also, we're humans and we'll find new things to do, and we'll adapt. I mean, certainly the one thing that I've really, and this is just my own personal sort of growth, I realized the struggle is important. And I'm here in Central Coast of California, where I lived here for about 9 years. I'm in the natural world, so I'm surrounded by wildlife, and I'm right against the national forest here. And I look at wildlife and I go, no animal in nature is resting. They don't get a day off, right? You're just hoping that you can eat and make love and survive and not get
Yeah.
eaten. And that's part of us. And we're humans. We need challenges, and we always rise to it. I mean, I certainly think we have to be very sensitive to people who are struggling, and try to help everyone get on their feet, and but also know that this will hopefully make us all stronger. And I mean, obviously, look at what you're doing. I mean, this whole world of us being able to communicate in this way, and to do these podcasts or Zooms or whatever we're doing is magical. And we're able to create content and connect with each other. And I get to meet you today, which is fantastic. And so,
well, I'm meeting a hero of mine, so it's like a dual thing, with the whole thing with the Zoom thing, and I think this is going to be the norm for quite a while.
yeah,
Which I think it's also a double-edged sword. I mean, you're missing the interaction, but you're getting it in a softer sense. But
yeah,
when we did the radio show, this was always,
right,
you did phoners,
right. Of course,
but
I remember
now.
them well. Yeah,
Yeah, since the lockdown, I said, you know what? Why not bring these faces on video?
yeah,
Let people, we're all stuck home. Let them
yeah,
see Reed Diamond. Let them see Lou Gossett Jr. And for maybe a half hour, an hour, they'll forget about what's going on. The mortgages due, the kids are a pain in the ass, and it's like, and especially for our men and women overseas. And
yeah.
sometimes, because the show goes out on AFN, American Forces Network, and we get a lot of letters from our servicemen and women. I have a retired 3-star general, General Martinez, who sometimes co-hosts with me. He loves the show. And on behalf of him, I just want to let you know that, everybody always thanks the military for their service, our troops, and rightly so.
For sure.
But he says, when Reed, when you're in the forward area, and there's very limited access to the outside world, for the little bit of time that they get, maybe an hour a day to watch a television show, he always makes sure that I thank them for their entertainment value, because just if you can take a Marine or a Navy guy or an Air Force guy and just make them smile from watching Everybody Loves Raymond or an episode of 24, you don't know the value that has. But I just wanted to let you know that thank you for for entertaining them for all these years.
Well, that's it's very sweet, and I do feel that obviously I don't make the same contribution that those guys make, but I feel if I can just help a little and entertain you just a small bit, at least I'm contributing in some tiny way. And
you definitely did, and I'm sorry we ran so long. I felt like we're two old guys from the neighborhood who are catching up.
This is. I hope we get to do this again, because I mean I feel like we just touched the tip of the iceberg. I love talking to you, and
we can go on.
You and I could go on all night.
Yeah.
Well, gosh, rock and roll. This has been an absolute pleasure.
It was for me, and I want you to know the door is always open. If you want to come on, if you got something that you want to promote, you have an open door. Or if you just want to come on and shoot the breeze, maybe if next time we get Rob Halford on, I'll bring you on with him.
It'd be very intimidating, but that would be very exciting. I have lots of questions for Rob Halford. Oh, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, and I've just adored talking to you. It's been wonderful.
Absolutely. Above all else, continued success and stay safe. And like I said, Reed,
you too.
If you need us, we're definitely. I'm here for you if you need me.
Sweet, absolutely. Right back at you. Rock and roll. This has been awesome.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. This was Reed Diamond. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Reed, God bless. Stay safe, and we'll see you all soon. Don't forget, Monday night, 5 p.m. Check out. We're going to be live with Marina Sirtis. If you're a Trekkie,
nice.
Deanna Troi from the Star Trek: The Next Generation, and then at 8:30 Monday night, Belinda Carlisle.
What?
Yes, you got to tune in if you're not working.
I just watched. Did you watch the Go Go documentary?
Yes, they were
Yeah.
some really. I tell you, ooh boy, talk about partiers.
Oh my God! But that's it's the perfect rock and roll documentary because they were so legit on that hardcore LA punk scene, and then they did it all. They all the tropes. I loved it. I'm just imagining them on mushrooms out at Palm Springs, just having a blast. All right, man. Thank you so much.
Take care, Reed
All right.
Diamond. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye. All right.